Seth found himself walking down his favorite path once again, the place he had gone since he was a mere kid to get away from the stresses of life. The snow crunched beneath his talons as he looked at the beautiful trees around him, the moon that sky casting its rays through the leaves above. It created a surreal feeling, one that Seth found extremely relaxing. The forest was quiet, nothing but the snow under his talons made any noise. His concerns, his anxieties, all melting away into the surreal, lonely place of this forest, and he was at peace. After a few more minutes of walking down the familiar, beloved path, Seth started to feel off. You know that feeling when you're being watched. You can never tell why, and usually it leads to nothing, but you just feel observed. And Seth felt that feeling, something he had never felt before while on his nighttime walks. He kept walking, hoping it was just an odd passing feeling, but after a few more minutes, it had gone on for too long, and something was truly afoot. Seth paused, standing in place as he listened and looked around. The forest was dead silent now. Distant wind was all that was audible in the vast forest. Seth's eyes scanned the tree lines around him, seeing nothing out of the ordinary. Then, Seth paused when he thought he saw movement. Was he being followed? Maybe his eyes played a trick on him. Regardless, he was now more nervous than ever. He brought his hand onto his plasma blade instinctively, taking a deep breath in an attempt to calm himself. He walked toward where he saw the movement, slow and careful in his movements, making sure he made no sound. His foot suddenly hit something hard, something that he didn't see when he was moving, causing him to stop in his tracks and look down. It was a book, a black dictionary-sized hardcover book. He had just walked through here, and he never saw this book. It was quite hard for him to miss it too, considering that it glowed an odd black aura. It was like nothing Seth had seen before. It felt like... No, it wasn't a feeling. The book called to him. Not in any voice, but an attraction. Like a planet attracting a moon. Or a magnet attracting an opposite pole. All of his concerns, stresses, thoughts, and feelings had been washed out, replaced with interest towards the book. What could it hold? Before he even processed it, he had picked up the book. It was warm to the touch, despite the cold Avalonian weather, and despite sitting in the snow mere seconds before. It filled Seth with unease, but also curiosity. He had to open it. What in the world could this thing be? He cut his walk short and made his way back home, moving with uncommon urgency. When there, he cleared a space on his table. He set down the mysterious book before him, sitting in front of it. He took a moment to truly observe the book, with the added light and focus. The aura around it seemed to pulsate. The book seemed to be inscribed with strange markings, although whether they were symbols, drawings, or something else entirely, he couldn't tell. The cover was made with such a strange material. Its feeling was beyond description, like nothing he had ever felt before. He slid his hand over to the side, grabbing the cover of the book. Seth held his breath in anticipation as he opened the book, slowly opening the cover, uncovering whatever may lay inside. He glanced down, his fear mounting as he expected something awful, something truly undescribable, something that may have never been meant to be seen by him or anyone he knew. What he found was blank page after blank page. He flipped through every page, getting more and more frantic. This couldn't be. Every single page of the book was completely blank. Was this some kind of sick joke? Who put this book here? Seth sighed a sigh of disappointment. He wasn't even sure what he expected, but it sure as hell wasn't this. He closed the book haphazardly, setting it back down onto the table. He decided he'd do some more tomorrow with it, but he wanted to get some rest now. It was late. He flicked off the light, taking one last look at the bizarre black glow that defied the darkness, before heading up to bed to sleep. Seth opened his eyes. Confused, he looked around. He was no longer in his bedroom. He was in what he can only describe as a dark void, some bizarre, pure black space with the same aura as the book he had looked at earlier. He glanced around, his eyes adjusting. Along with that, his mind adjusted. His mind was trying its best to comprehend what was before him, trying to piece it together in any way that made sense, trying to decipher the unknown. And suddenly, Seth wished he had kept his eyes closed. A being, no, some monstrosity stood before him. Something that he could have never imagined. Something that gave him a headache to look at. Something that froze his entire body. He could never describe a single part of this sight to anyone with any earthly words. It didn't seem to have a size. It had no describable features. Its colors were nothing that he had ever seen. It didn't really seem like it was there, yet it was clearly there. It had no movement, but it clearly moved. This being existed on a different plane of perception, one that we were never meant to perceive. More and more of it became visible, as his mind struggled to decipher all of it. Seth wanted to scream, cry, run, and observe all at once, yet none of those happened. He found himself froze with shock. And then, it spoke to him. Its voice, too, was beyond description. It sounded like it originated from every single direction at once, yet also coming from absolutely no direction at once. Yet, it spoke English, a deep voice that filled Seth with dread just listening to. "You are awake," the voice said. Seth couldn't process what that even meant. His mind was racing with hundreds of thoughts, and sure as hell none of those thoughts covered that.
"Not awake as in what you would think, but awake to our presence. You have been chosen, Seth."
Hearing this absolute monstrosity speak his name filled Seth with unfathomable fear. He wanted to vomit now. He felt like he would pass out.
"Finding the book was the first step. Now you have awoken. You can temporarily and limitedly perceive us. Now you must read the book again. In it, you will find explanations, and then instructions. Follow. If you fail to do so, you will be doomed to a fate worse than death, worse than anyone in your realm could ever comprehend. Do not fail us, Seth. We will be seeing you."
Seth found himself back in his room, instantly. He lay there, paralyzed with fear for what felt like at least 2 hours. He ran through his head again and again everything he saw, and his head screamed in retaliation, a headache worse than he'd ever felt. This wasn't supposed to be. What had he done? After those 2 hours of paralyzing fear and confusion, Seth could move. God, he couldn't think about anything else now. He looked around his room and saw bizarre shapes, flowing streaks of colors. He saw what looked like eyes and wisps. He had to be rid of this. He had to do something. The book held answers. The book would give him at least some ability to understand, right? That was the least he could hope for. Understanding. He ran downstairs, his whole body shaking like never before, his mind racing with panic. He sat down, and the book now glowed in a color he didn't recognize. He heard voices calling from it now, voices of his friends, voices of his family, voices of those he knew, voices of those he didn't, voices of the dead, voices of the alive, all saying hundreds and hundreds of things. He swung the book open as soon as he could, and before him laid words that were not there before. Each page was filled now. He began reading, frantically, and as he began reading, the pain in his head began to fade. The room slowly returned to normalcy. Each page he read seemed to clear up one more confusion. Thus he kept reading, hoping to rid himself of this terrifying curse upon him. He closed the book with a relieved sigh. The disillusion reality bestowed upon him had faded. It was all back to normal. The sun was out now. It had been at least 4 hours, and he had read what he assumed to be around 350 pages. What was described to him, he couldn't say. None of it made sense. None of it felt real. None of the words he read were even in a language that he understood. Yet, everything that had confused him had now been answered. No more was his mind racing with fear and obliterating him. It made sense, yet he couldn't tell you a single thing about it. There was one part that he remembered more than others, though. The instructions. With the instructions came a bizarre marking device, sort of like a marker, but the same otherworldly color of the book's shine. It was never described to him what these instructions were for. They didn't fit in with the rest of the book. But he could remember them clearly, and he remembered exactly the words that compromised it. He was to create a circle with the bizarre marker. Then he was to simply wait, and to think of all the things he had just read as intensely as he could while he was waiting, looking into the circle. Of course, you would think that he wouldn't do such a thing. Why in the world would you? Who knows what you're messing with? You could simply get the book as far away from you as you could, and go back to your normal life. The best you could, anyway. But Seth, he couldn't. His perception and his view on reality, his understanding of the universe, was absolutely and utterly decimated. He knew things that no one had ever known before. He knew why we were here, where we were going, what life truly was. Everything was clear. He knew he had to do this now. The alternatives, well, Seth drew the marker from his desk, clearing a space in his room. He then drew a circle, perfectly to the dimensions described to him, and as soon as it was complete, he looked into it. It flooded in, filling the center with the same bizarre color as before, and a feeling, past unease, past fear, past anxiety, worse than any of those could ever even feel, washed over him. But he had to keep going. There was no other choice in the universe. He followed the instructions. He thought about everything he had just learned. He stared deep into the circle. All of these bizarre thoughts passing through his brain. A low droning noise filled his brain too. It resonated in him, came from deep in his thoughts, and it only got louder. He stood there for what felt like eternities. It felt like reality around him was collapsing, bending inwards. And only then did he realize what was going on. Suddenly, he could describe everything. It all made perfect sense now. After looking at it all, he could put it into words. He was bridging our reality to one that lay beyond, one that was not in any way like our own. The laws of science as we know them don't even apply there. The beasts who inhabit it are ancient and powerful, all-knowing and all-encompassing, and yet somehow they were dying. Their realm was threatened as our own eats away at theirs. Our two realms cannot exist together. And Seth knew now that ours would never survive, because what was coming through that gateway he made would destroy our realm in mere seconds, leaving absolutely no trace of anything of ours. None of our achievements, none of our lives and histories, none of our places and feelings, none of our laws of science and discoveries. It would all be wiped away in just seconds. And there it was. He didn't even see it appear. It just seemed to have manifested itself into existence. A purple orb. That was all it was. A purple orb that glowed bright and pulsed with light. Seth was confused. He stared at it for about a minute and nothing had changed. Reality was still here, He hadn't been ripped into oblivion. He hadn't been killed by the mere sight of an unfathomable being. It was just a purple orb. Out of all of his spanning knowledge, out of all the horrors and truths of our astral plane that had been revealed to him, he still couldn't have predicted what happened next. "Huh, this place looks really cool. Are you Seth?" said a soft, near normal voice. What? Seth couldn't understand. His mind had been broken earlier and he was able to fix it, if you could even call it that, but now his understanding felt broken again. "I'm just gonna assume you are. Hey, check out this thing I can do," the purple orb said, doing what could only be described as showing off a trick. It spun in the air and twirled around. What are you? What the hell is the meaning of this?" Seth shouted out in a sudden rage. He had his definition of reality and life shattered to pieces. And for this? What in the fuck was this even supposed to be? "Oh, me? I'm supposed to destroy this realm of existence is all. You already know that, though." "Oh, and I'm also your new roommate." Seth stared at the orb. He couldn't even comprehensively think anymore. His mind was shattered beyond imagination. "And that room is your body. Now, if you'll excuse me," the orb said, charging into Seth's body. In that split second, Seth's consciousness, his being, his soul, it all ceased to be. Seth was removed from existence as a whole in that split second. Seth was no more. It was like he had never existed. His body found a new host, a new personality, a new consciousness, a new being. The new host looked down, outstretching his new arms, admiring his newfound residence. What a beautiful body! It was exactly like how it was taught to him. And it was even cooler than he had thought. The feathers were beautiful shades of orange and black, colors that he had never seen back at home. He felt... Yeah, he felt. It was such a new experience. He felt the floor he stood on and the temperature of the room. He touched himself, amazed at the sensation. He hit himself, and it hurt. And he regretted doing that. So pain was as bad as they described. He moved his leg. It was weird, but he quickly figured out how to control his new body. He spoke, and it took him a few tries, but he was able to work the voice box and say, "Test." He moved around the room, looking at everything with amazement, touching things and getting used to the realm of ours. Then he heard it, his creators communicating to him through his gateway to our realm. They told him what he already knew.
"You must go forth. You must destroy the realm while we still have a chance. Save our reality. You know what will happen should you fail."
And he did. He knew why he was made. He knew why he was here. He knew his power and how to use it. He knew what he was doing all of this for. And he knew one more thing. In the infinite knowledge his creators gave him, they accidentally gave him something that he most likely wasn't meant to know. They could no longer do a thing to him, so long as he destroyed the connection from our reality to theirs. The creators have been weakened over the millennia, and their bluffs of destroying the lives of those in our realm were nothing more than that. Bluffs. He smirked. He heard the creators calling out to him repeatedly, getting more and more aggressive, barking orders at him, then turning to shock and fear as their creation walked towards the book they had placed in our realm. They quickly realized what he was doing. Their last chance, their last creation, their last hope, was rebelling.
"You fool! Without your connection to our realm, you will die out there. You will die out there. You will lose all of your power. You will lose all of your power. Just like them. You will never be able to return home. You will never be able to return home. Cease to exist amongst the astral plane. Cease to exist amongst the astral plane. Stop it once. You can't. Nothing."
The book was ripped in half, easily, with the creation's power. But he felt a sharp pain near instantly, and knew what that was. That was the feeling of nearly all of his other realmly powers leaving him. It took him a bit to recover from the pain, and he looked back. The room was free of the other realm's grasp. His plan had worked. He was free of that forsaken realm. He was where he wanted to be. He learned a lot about our realm, the realm that he was made to destroy, in his eternities of training and fine-tuning, and through it all, he took a fancy to it, to our life, to our way of living, to our understanding and existence. To hell with that realm he came from, to hell with his creators, and to hell with their survival. That realm was nothing more but a stain on the astral plane. This realm, his new home, it deserves to thrive. He had planned it all out, and now, well, he was free. Free in this brand new realm. He sat there, and he thought. He thought about what to do next. Danny, which was the name that he had decided for himself while learning about our realm, walked over to the door. He stepped outside into the beautiful sunrise, a sight unparalleled by the sights of his own realm, the warmth on his feathers, the beauty of the snow and the other creatures moving around him. Danny knew he was here to stay. And the first thing in our realm that he wanted to try, well, he went to the freezer to go get some ice cream.